You are listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson, exploring biblical prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Well, folks, I cannot believe it. We are actually in a new calendar year, and I am in a new place, and Nehemia is in a new place. This is Prophet Pearls, Keith Johnson, along with my friend, Chaver Shili, Nehemia Gordon. Nehemia, where are you?
Keith, I am, after a very long journey of nearly 2,000 miles, I have settled down for a time as the Wandering Jew in San Antonio, Texas, not far from the Alamo. Nope.
Wow. And how did you get there? Tell me how you got there. I mean,
So
let's bring everybody up to date. You and I, we were, okay.
Well, last time they heard from us, we were together at your house in Charlotte. You went off somewhere that you'll tell them about in a minute. But I got in the car, drove in my 2002 Honda Accord, and started driving to Cherokee, North Carolina. Had an amazing experience there on the Trail of Tears. Then ended up going to Tennessee, through Arkansas, and then finally the whole length of Texas, and ended up in San Antone, as the locals call it.
San Antone. Wow, yep. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I've been on a few airplanes, trains, and automobiles myself, been across the ocean. Actually, presently, I'm in the most populous city in the world. You may hear some knocking on the outside. I'm in Shanghai, China right now.
Wait, you're in Shanghai, China?
Yes, I will try my best to bring people up to date. There's so much that's going on. I'll give them pieces. Right now it's the beginning of a new year, and so that's where I am right now. And if there's some knocking, folks, I'm just going to say right now, it was easier when Nehemia and I were in the same room together. We were recording together. We had our special computer. We could look at each other and talk, and now we're doing this technology thing. And it's going to be a challenge. In fact, we almost didn't even have the opportunity to do this recording. So we're going to try our best. Am I right, Nehemia? We're going to try our best to do what we can to keep things going.
Yeah. I came to San Antonio to the Alamo to make my last stand, where Davy Crockett and that Bowie guy, whatever his name is, did it. What are you doing in Shanghai? Did you just go there because you were jealous because I spent a year in China?
Yeah, right. I wish that was the case. No. There's been an open door here. And really, I have to be pretty sensitive about it right now, so I can't talk a lot about it. I can only say this. I did mention to folks, I actually was in the Philippines a couple weeks ago, and I was able to do that because I was actually in Shanghai, only a 3-hour flight there and back, and there's some other opportunities like that in this region. And so right now this is sort of a little bit of like a kind of like a base of operations. There are things that are going to happen from here because of an open door, which I will talk about as we go, and especially as things develop. But right now it's a little sensitive, so I'm just going to have people to keep praying for me. I know that you're here, there, and everywhere. We're both kind of continuing to do what we're doing, but from remote locations. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. So listen, we're going to get started, Nehemia, but before we get started, I just have to bring something up.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be talking in this section that we're going to be talking about, and it's funny. We kind of talked about this before, and when I went to go and study this section, I had to kind of take a different look. But so I tell you what, why don't we do this? Do this, Nehemia? Why don't you tell us what the section is officially, and then we're gonna get right into it.
Well, so this week's Torah portion is Vayechi, which is the last chapters of Genesis, where Jacob is on his deathbed, and we're doing the corresponding prophets portion, where David's on his deathbed, and obviously that's the parallel. Jacob is giving instruction to his sons, and David is giving instruction to his son Solomon, and that's what it is. 1 Kings chapter 2 verses 1 through 12.
Yeah, but the reason I say that it's sort of connected is because we had done the section before with David and Solomon.
It's really interesting. We did chapter 1 and we did chapter 3. Now we're going back and doing chapter 2.
So that's why I say it's really kind of an interesting approach here. I will tell you something though before we get started. I don't know if you knew this or not. I don't know if the listeners know this or not. We had a date about let's see, it would have been in December, which was 12. 13.
We're still in
14.
December.
Well, no, it's January right now, Nehemia. What are you talking
pre-recording
about?
it. So.
Well, okay, you're in. Look, I'm ahead of time right now. I'm on the other side of here.
It's true.
So listen. It was really interesting. There was a date that was called 12/13/14.
Oh,
the 12th month, the 13th day, the 14th. 2014.
Yeah.
Now, are you ready for this?
Sure.
We're never going to get another date like that in our lifetime.
Now, is that in the Creator's calendar, 12/13/14, or?
No. This has to do with the Gregorian calendar, 12/13/14.
Okay.
We're never going to get another.
So we could get another date like that. You could just make up a calendar out of this, thin blue sky, like Pope Gregory did, and you could say, today is year 14, and so I don't know the significance of that. All right.
Well, according to the Gregorian dates, you're never going to get a 12, 13, 14, nothing like that again in our lifetime. So, but it's interesting because David's about to go the path of all mankind, and so when we think about that from that perspective, it's like, man, there won't be another date like that. So that means that eventually we're all going to face this really difficult time. I think it's kind of a difficult time. It's kind of a scary time, but when David is doing what he's doing, it's really interesting. So can we get right into this?
Sure. If you're going to bring up these calendar games, can I talk about something that people don't know about? So it's really interesting. So I'm on a certain date on the Gregorian calendar, and Keith is on a different date in the Gregorian calendar because he's in China, which is apparently 14 hours ahead of San Antonio. And of course, we there's this great scene where David and Jonathan they meet and they say, and they decide they're going to meet 3 days later, and they call it the Moed. They say we're going to meet at the Moed, and Moed is appointed time, but they set the appointed time, meaning it's a meeting time. So Keith and I, audience, decided to meet at a Moed, and the Moed we decided to meet was 7 p.m. my time in San Antonio, and I said 8 a.m. in Shanghai, and it turned out that I got it off by an hour because, people have just messed up time, and that's why I love God's time so much.
Yes, folks, that's as close as we're going to get to an admission of a dropped ball, but that's okay. It's okay.
Look, you've got these weird time zones in China.
Let's just admit it.
It's like the sun rises at 10 a.m. in Western China. It's the weirdest thing.
Well, listen, let me say this, folks. You might hear some sounds in the background. That's because I live in a very remote situation, a very remote place right now. There's some knocking and banging and things like that, and there's just no way to get around it because this is the Moed. This is the time we're meeting, and for whatever reason, they've decided to do this at this particular time. So let's get into this.
This is a sign, Keith. I think it's a sign that someone's knocking on the door and they want to come in, and you must open the door and don't shut it this time.
Yeah, I wish it was a door, and rather it's outside the building.
It's construction, huh?
So it says this, Nehemia. Yeah. It says in 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1, as David's time to die drew near. Certainly that's got to be a different phrase in the Hebrew. It says here in my translation, NAS, as David's time to die drew near, he then charged Solomon his son. So what does it say in the Hebrew?
It says and the days of David to die came close.
Yes, they came close. So they're coming close, and then here it comes. Now, this I got to tell you before we get started. We've got these wonderful folks that have come alongside, and they've been Prophet Pearls partners, and our Prophet Pearls partners for this week is Leon Green, Wendy, and Chuck McKay. These folks have been willing to come alongside and help to support this process. And really, it's interesting, Nehemia, what I love about inviting people to make comments and questions is that it's the general approach that we have to Scripture, which is let's take a look at it and find out what it says in language, history, and context. And I always love it when people can kind of go to the obvious and then ask if there's anything deeper rather than trying to make something deep and then saying, let's go even further. So what I appreciate about our friends Leon, Wendy, and Chuck, what they've done is they've looked at the obvious. They've looked at it and they said, okay, so what does this mean? And so you're going to have to do some really difficult work with the special computer. I'm sure you don't have this stuff at the top of your head. So can we go right into it?
Let's do it.
It says here, he says he charged his son. Okay, so he's charging Solomon. He's giving him. Of course, so this is what it says in English. Of course, we're gonna look and see what it says.
Is that said he charged his son?
Okay, so I'm actually in the NAS version.
So is this like a situation where an indictment came down and he charged his son?
Doesn't that is funny?
No, like in JPS it says he instructed his son. In the Hebrew it says Vayetzav, and he commanded Shlomo his son.
Yeah. So what was interesting for me is when I looked at the fact that he says that he commanded him, immediately I'm thinking, okay, it sort of feels more biblical to me that he commanded him, the commandments.
Yeah.
But again, in English, when it says he charged him, it's kind of like, it's like he's telling him, okay, now here's what you have to do. I don't know. How do you see that when you hear
no,
the word?
it's a command, and the first time that appears in the Tanakh, actually, so first of all, Genesis 49:29, there we have, let's see, we have Jacob commanding his sons. It says, same thing. And actually, what does it have in yours in Genesis 49:29? In Hebrew it says, Vayetzav, and he commanded them, and he said to them, I am gathered to my people, bury me with my fathers in the cave of, which is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave which is in the field of Machpelah, etc. Genesis 49:29, same exact word, and obviously it's the parallel, the corresponding section. JPS has he instructed them in both places. What do you got?
We have charged in NASB.
So he charged them. Okay, and I guess charge could mean to command. Now, what's the first time that word appears? That's what I always like to know. Vayetzav first appears, and he commanded when God is speaking to Adam, to mankind. And let me just see something real quick here. So, yeah, it's Genesis chapter 2, verse 16. And Yehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, from all the trees of the garden you shall surely eat. And he goes on to say, but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil you must not eat. And the rest of the story is well known. So that's actually the first commandment in the history of anything, is God commanding man, don't eat it. He's charging him. And this is not, it's interesting because the Hebrew word for testament, like, you got last will and testament. So that word is from the word sav, the word sava'ah. It's a commandment. And, we've got the Old Testament and the New Testament, those terms, which I couldn't even tell you what the Hebrew equivalent is, because there is no such concept in Hebrew of an Old Testament. And I mean, obviously there's an Old Covenant and a New Covenant, although in the Tanakh we hear about the renewed covenant. So yes. God's commandment, his covenant, his testament first appears in Genesis 2:16. That's the first time we have God giving us a testament. And that is this testament of don't eat from the tree, and they eat from the tree. And you could say, okay, well then there's a New Testament as soon as God commands Noah and he commands Moses. And the way I look at it is this: God is making a covenant with mankind. He made the first covenant here in Genesis 2:16. They could have, and I know this is off topic, so I won't go too much into it, but basically they had an opportunity to eat from the tree of life. All they had to do was not eat of the tree of knowledge, and they could have eaten from the tree of life. And they chose to break the covenant, and then he gave them a second bite of the apple, so to speak, through the Torah. That's how I look at it. And that is the testament of Yehovah Elohim.
Amen. Amen.
There it is.
Amen.
And now for the testament of David to his son.
Yeah. And it says here, well, of course, so he says, and Nehemia, I don't know if you'd be willing to do this or not.
What's that?
This kind of caught my attention. So, and I want you to, as we go into this new year, there's so much that's going to go on. I want you to always pick a word of the week, but there's a word of the week here that really kind of, I think, is really interesting, and I want to know if we could possibly take a look at this word. It says, keep the charge. Now he says he charged him, okay, in English. Now it says in 1 Kings 2:3, keep the charge.
Wait,
now,
how do we
what's
skip over
interesting
verse 2? We got to talk about verse 2.
No, I'm sorry. Well, 2. I'm connecting it to 2.
Oh, okay.
Because he says he's going the way of all earth. Be strong, therefore, show yourself a man. That's what he's actually saying to his son. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's stop there and go with that phrase.
Yes, so that's pretty cool.
Be strong, therefore, and show yourself.
Be strong and become a man is what it literally says in the Hebrew. And you shall be to a man, which means become a man. So that's really interesting. We have this expression in English. And can I say something a little controversial? I'm going to anyway. So American Western culture has been sissified. They've come along and they said, oh, no, you can't tell someone to be a man because men and women are completely equal and therefore it's sexist to say to someone, be a man. But that's what it says in Scripture, be a man. And that's what he's saying, be strong and be a man. And here what it means to be a man, and maybe this is what you were getting at, is this goes back to Joshua where he says be strong and courageous to keep the Torah, and here he's saying be a man and keep the commandments. Isn't that awesome?
It's amazing, and that's really something. I was gonna do something that. And here's what let me just say this, folks. I want people that are listening this year as we go into this new Gregorian year. I know that we're in a biblical year, but as in this Gregorian year, as we start out Prophet Pearls, I really want people to be kind of like these folks that are our partners, because what our partners are doing is they're looking in ahead of time. They're seeing what it's saying. They're asking questions. They're making comments. I want people to do that with us. I want them to be like the Bereans, to search it, search the scriptures to see what it's saying. And then, of course, one of the great things that we have opportunity to do with both of us is they can go to the pages where they're listening to Prophet Pearls, and they can make comments. Those comments can be from the week previous, and they can be looking at even at something that's coming in the forward. Meaning, we really want people to interact with us. But one of the things, Nehemia, that I did that was that really kind of caught me off guard, and you're probably going to think this is too controversial, but I'm going to do it. So he says, "I'm going the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and show yourself a man." So I've got 3 sons, and one of the things that I did is I actually used this passage as early in their high school years, the phrase of "be strong, therefore, and show yourself a man." Yeah. What was interesting is that in the context, you just said it. What does it look like, therefore, to show yourself a man? And so that's what the connection is for the next verse. But then I wanted to do something.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I wanted to do something. So when it says "show yourself a man," I asked myself, where else might we have? Where might have David seen this? Where may he heard it before?
Come on.
And so there's a really interesting verse. Well, no, hold on. There's a really
I've got that verse. I'm burning to share it, but go ahead.
No.
You got it. Go ahead, share it.
Well, I tell you what. I'm going to give you. Go ahead. I want to pass it off. No. Well, first I wanted to bring
you shared this with your sons.
So then, as Joshua, you have Joshua doing all these things, but then there's a really interesting, obscure verse in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 9. You saw it?
That's the verse I was going to bring. Go ahead, bring it.
Hey, folks, it's really interesting. When we're sitting in the same room together, we could talk or whatever. Now we're completely, 7,000 to 8,000 miles apart, and we're looking at these verses and getting excited. That just says to me that there is something about it. But Nehemia, seriously, what I really wanted to do is I wanted to see if you also looked at this and how you interpreted it.
Yeah. So can you read it? Go ahead. 1 Samuel 4:9.
No. 1 Samuel 4:9. It says, "Take courage," and here it's the Philistines. Yeah. "Take courage, therefore, be strong, whatever, and be men."
Yeah.
And so I asked myself the question: what did David hear this? Was this a phrase that they used when they went to fight?
Clearly. And so go on with the verse. So he says, "Be strong and be men." It's the same phrase: "Become men, be men, O Philistines, lest you serve the Hebrews as they served you." And then he reiterates it: "Be men and v'nilchamtem, and go out to war, engage in battle." So here they realize that what it means to be a man in this context is to fight. If you don't fight, you're going to be a slave. So you better go fight those Hebrews. This isn't, this is a matter of, and when I read this, I get the image of, and I apologize to those who don't like this particular person, or this movie, but I get the image of, in Brave, of another Philistine, Mel Gibson, who was in the movie Braveheart, and he goes out in front of the people and he rouses them up, and he's and telling them to go fight, and it's they're fighting for freedom. And this is exactly what the Philistines were saying to their own people: go out, be strong, otherwise you're going to be slaves of the Hebrews. And so what it means to be strong in this case and to be a man is to fight. So now let's tie it back into our verse. Yeah.
Well, go ahead. Keep going.
Beseder, you did it. Come on, go ahead. you brought it. Bring it.
We're being we're being so nice. No, but
now back to 1 Kings 2:2 and 3. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so I was getting to verse 3, but I want to let you finish 2, because this next thing is going to take probably most of the show.
Okay, so he's saying be a man, be strong and be a man, which it's not about fighting, it's not about war. David did that in his lifetime. For Solomon to be a man, to be strong, means to do what it says in verse 3. It means to keep the Mishmeret Yehovah, the guarded, the thing that Yehovah has given us, the treasure of Yehovah your God, to go in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, and his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the Torah of Moshe, etc., etc. That's what it means to be a man. So there's this phrase, "Be strong and be a man," with the Philistines, and they explain what they mean by it. They mean go to war, and David also explains what he means by "be strong and be a man." It doesn't mean go to war; it means keep the Torah.
Amen. Well, we're gonna unpack this a little bit, and I wanted to see if you could take. Would you be willing to take a look at this word, mishmeret?
That's an interesting word.
Noun. Yeah, I wanted to know if we'd be willing to let this be the word of the week. If you
that's
could
a
just
tough
tell us
word
what
of the
it
week.
is.
I don't know.
It is a very tough word of the week, but here's why I want people to consider.
I don't know if I want that to be the word of the week. Okay,
you don't like that one? You don't like that one?
I think that might be too advanced for some of the people. What do you think? I don't know.
Well, here's why I want you to consider it, because the first word in 1 Kings 2:3, and then this word, there's like this really cool thing that happens all the time in Scripture, in the Hebrew in the Hebrew Scriptures, where you can be reading it and you can see sort of roots and you can see connections, and it's almost like a very natural thing. Like sometimes you'll say, "Well, I can't believe it says that in the English. I can't believe it, blah blah blah." It's obvious. Well, it's not obvious, but when you open the Hebrew and you see these things, they sort of jump off the page. So without maybe you don't want to make it the word of the week, but at least give us a little bit of connection.
We'll make it the word. All right.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's mem, shin, mem, resh, tav. Every word in the Hebrew language has a three-letter root. The three-letter root is shin, mem, resh, which is shamar, meaning to guard. For example, when it says to keep the Shabbat, it says shamor et yom HaShabbat l'kadsho, keep the Sabbath to sanctify it. It's the same root, shin mem resh. It's a word that it's such a I guess I'd call it a versatile word, which makes it difficult to translate. So the first time we have it is in Genesis 2:15, and Yehovah Elohim took the man and he placed him in the Garden of Eden to le'avda, to work it, which is not what we were told in kindergarten. He actually worked in the Garden of Eden. Ula shomra, and to keep it. So and that's the same root, shamar. So mishmeret is that which is shamarred, that which is kept. And so the Garden of Eden, man was put in it for the purpose of working it and guarding it, keeping it, whatever that means exactly. It means to tend it, to stewardship over the garden. So the next time we have is Genesis 3:24, where it has kind of a really different meaning. There we have the this strange flaming sword, which is lishmor et derech etz hachaim, to guard the way to the tree of life, keep man out of there. So there it's guard in the sense that we would think of, like a security guard at a bank. There's somebody standing there to prevent somebody else from getting in. That's not what Adam was doing with the Garden of Eden. He was guarding it in a very different sense. He was, maintaining it. Oh man, Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's keeper, in Genesis 4:9. That's the next time we have that root. So then we could go on and on and on about this root. It's a root that often appears in the context of keeping the Torah, of guarding the Torah, maintaining the Torah. And then we have mishmeret, which is, and those are all verbs that we looked at. So the noun is mishmeret, that which is kept.
So it's interesting, Nehemia, when you go to Genesis 26:5, and I always thought this was so cool. In Genesis 26:5, when Abraham, speaking of Abraham, it says, "Because he obeyed me and he kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah."
Yeah,
and
that word charge again.
It's like, no. I mean, it's what's so interesting about that is like, well, wait a minute, hold on. The people ask the question, wait, when did he get this scroll? When did Abraham get this scroll? And I don't want to go into great depth about it, but when I see that, I just get this
Wait, so
image
tell the
in my
people which
mind.
word is mishmeret, because I know that. I don't know if they know.
Saying in
Genesis 26:5, which
26:5,
word is the word of the week?
mishmeret.
Right, I know that, but tell them in English from what you just read.
Oh, I have to open up my different. I'm actually looking at the Hebrew here. I'd have to switch. Here's
showing off. So the JPS, inasmuch as Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my laws, and my teachings. Charge in Hebrew is mishmeret. Before you were bringing the NASB, let's just pull that one up just out of curiosity. It says my charge. And it's funny because the NASB had the word vayetzav, which is the root of the word mitzvah, or commandment, as charge. And here mishmeret is charge. It's a different word altogether. New King James has charge. Wow, they're pretty consistent. They all have charge. And the word is mishmeret, which is actually that which is guarded. And he guarded and so some people translate this as treasure. I've heard that in Jewish sources. They like the translation treasure, because what do you guard? What do you put in a safe? You put something that you want kept, you want preserved, and so hence the word treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
well, I just think
go ahead. Sorry.
No. What I just think is interesting is that once we get to this word, when I opened up 1 Kings 2:3, and I wanted you to do something. I want to tell you first of all, Nehemia, I really appreciate the fact that you have been reading the actual passage in Hebrew. If people haven't gotten a chance to listen to that, you don't have to know a word of Hebrew. Just the fact that you're able to hear it as it was written, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate that. I love putting that up every single week. Mm-hmm. What I do is I put up you doing that, and I take the picture that's connected, and it just, I don't know what it is about it. It just it's really wonderful. But in 1 Kings 2:3, if you were to read just the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in Hebrew, when you read that, do you make the connection in your mind immediately between the words shamar and mishmeret?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very common structure in Hebrew that you have a noun and a verb that come from the same 3-letter root, and mm-hmm. the noun describes the verb describes the action of the noun.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I wanted to say.
So it says, when I'm reading Vishamarta et mishmeret Yehovah Elohecha, and you will guard the mishmeret, the guarding, that which is guarded of Yehovah your God. The charge, the treasure, Yes.
So what's interesting, so when I look at that, and then I look at my English, immediately I say, Hebrew, there's the 2 words connected, and then in English they're not connected. Keep and charge.
Keep the charge. So it's guard the guarding. So can I talk about a few more, since this is the word of the week, we got to bring a few more verses just to flush out this word mishmeret, which you can translate as charge. I'm going to translate it as treasure. Okay? It says Exodus 12:6 in the New King James. I'll bring that. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. So the word isn't even there. I don't even know what to do with that. You shall keep it. It's talking about the lamb that you take on the 10th and you keep it until it literally says, and it shall be for you a mishmeret, that which is kept until the 14th day of this month. And the New King James just has it, I guess. It doesn't even have it. All right. NIV has take care of them until the 14th day of the month. So it has them, take care of them. JPS has you shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month. So again, in Hebrew, it shall be for you a mishmeret, a charge, a guard, a treasure, until the 14th day of this month, talking about the Paschal Lamb. Exodus 16:23, it's speaking about the man, or the manna, which is collected on this. Is a really interesting verse. We should do a whole teaching on this. He said to them, this is what Yehovah meant. Tomorrow is the day of rest, a holy Sabbath of Yehovah. Bake that which you will bake, boil that which you will boil, and all that is left put aside to be kept until morning. And in Hebrew it says, and all that remains you shall place for you as a mishmeret until the morning. It's to be kept. It's something which is guarded, it's kept, it's preserved. Their treasure doesn't really fit, but it's the same concept. It's something that's put aside. Exodus 16:32, it's talking about a long-term mishmeret, not just overnight like it was in the previous verse, but here it says, Moses said, this is what Yehovah has commanded, let 1 omer, that's a measurement, of the manna be kept throughout the ages in order that we may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out from the land of Egypt. So where is the word mishmeret? It literally says in the Hebrew, Moshe said, this is the matter which Yehovah commanded, a full omer of it shall be lemishmeret, as a mishmeret for your generations. So they just translate it as kept. They're not indicating that's being kept as a treasure. They translate it as a noun and not as a verb and not the noun that it is. So it's something that's kept. It's something that can be kept overnight. It can be kept for thousands of years, like the manna. So that's really interesting. And then Leviticus 18:30, it says, you shall keep my charge not to engage in any of the abhorrent practices. And the word, and in Hebrew it says, same as in our verse, it says, ushmartem et mishmarti, and you shall keep my mishmeret. So it's almost exactly what David says to Solomon. Leviticus 22:9, v'shamru et mishmarti, and they shall keep my mishmeret. They shall keep my treasure, etc., etc. So we have this quite a bit as a common phrase, especially appears a lot in like Leviticus and Numbers.
This is why I wanted it to be the word of the week, Nehemia. It's a really interesting.
But it's really difficult to translate. Like, so how are you going to translate this? Treasure, that which is kept, that's a whole mouthful. Literally, it's that which is kept, and it could be kept overnight. It could be kept in the sense of just observing it and doing it and maintaining it. I'm going to bring up a point which is it's too esoteric. I won't bring it. So Deuteronomy 11:1, it says, "And you shall love Yehovah your God, and you shall keep his mishmeret, his statutes and his judgments and his commandments all the days." That it almost seems like David is quoting Deuteronomy 11:1, like that's really close to what he says to Solomon.
Well, here's what I wanted to do. Can we do something? Would you be willing to do this? This is actually from our partners, and actually it's something that I was dealing with even at a little bit of a deeper level. As I want us to ask the question: when you're reading this and you hear this word, and you shall keep, or this word mishmeret, you shall keep this, that which is kept, the Yehovah your God. And then here's how. Now, tell me if I'm right or wrong here. Here's how you're going to keep it: to walk in His ways. Okay, so that seems to me when I hear that, okay, so to walk in His ways, okay, this seems to be a way of living, a way of, in other words, there's action to this. And how do I walk in His ways? Now, here it comes again. To keep, the word shamar, lishmor, to keep what? Now, here's where I really need your help, Nehemia.
Yeah.
We really need your help here. When you hear the word statutes, commandments, ordinances, it says in the NAS, and testimonies, what do you see as the differences? I mean, why would David?
Yeah, people have spun
we have to talk about this.
Theories about the statute is this, and even the rabbis, they say, for example, they'll say a statute is a commandment that's arbitrary. And what do they mean by arbitrary? They give the example of the red heifer. Why is it red and not, blue? I was in Nepal and I saw blue cows. Why is it a blue heifer and not or why is it a red heifer and not a blue heifer?
Wait, stop for a second. For a second. You're colorblind. You've said
I'm
that you're colorblind.
Weak. I'm not colorblind.
You don't know the difference? I've seen your socks.
No, I can tell the difference between red and blue. I just can't tell the difference between navy and black and dark green.
Okay. Blue cow.
So no, I've seen blue cows, and it might have been a black cow. I'll stipulate that, or a green cow. I'm pretty sure it was blue. So the point is, so the rabbis say that's a statute, something which is totally arbitrary, as opposed to a commandment, which makes sense. An example of a commandment would be, don't murder. I could figure out on my own not to murder without God telling me that, and so that hence is a different category. Now, I've looked at these terms, over the years, and I've not seen any kind of consistent explanation of the difference between a statute and a commandment. What you have as ordinances actually is judgments, testimonies. I don't know what the difference is. And frankly, neither does anybody else. We first hear about these different terms, over in Genesis 26:5, in the verse that you quoted. And as much as Abraham obeyed me and kept my mishmeret, my treasure, my charge, and it says mitzvotai, my commandments, chukotai, my statutes, v'torotai, and my teachings, or literally my Torahs. So what's the difference between a mitzvah and a chukah and a Torah? I don't know. And like I said, neither does anybody else.
Oh boy! Well, here I was all excited about this, Nehemia, and
can I share one thing that is wrong?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the questions I challenged the rabbis growing up, I said, the basis of rabbinical Judaism, the basis of Phariseeism that I grew up with, was that Moses received 2 Torahs on Mount Sinai, a written Torah and an oral Torah. I said, and at first I kind of just accepted this as a fact. And then finally I said, show me a single verse anywhere in the Tanakh that says that Moses received an oral law. And they weren't able to. But then they said, well, our ancient rabbis interpreted Exodus 24:12 as referring to both the written law and the oral law. And what does that mean? So it says there that, I'll read you the JPS. The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teaching and the commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them. And so we have here in the Hebrew it says he will give him the Torah, which just means instruction. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about the Torah of Moses. And the commandment which I have written to instruct them. So the word to instruct them refers to the oral law, I was told. And the point is, you have these different terms, Torah and mitzvah, and we can't really say what the difference is between them. No one really knows, not even the rabbis with their oral law. So,
well, one thing I really did appreciate when I was reading it, I just kind of went to the idea of David. Okay. And I thought, okay, so what do I know about David? And so what I know about David is he loved to write, and my most favorite psalm that David wrote is Psalm 119.
Yeah.
And when I went through that psalm, I asked myself, okay, so what's David doing here? He's talking to Solomon, and he's charging him. He's giving him this is what you shall keep. And what's so interesting, Nehemia, and I know I want people to do this for themselves. Maybe you can make it even quicker. But what I asked myself, is there a time where is there another time where David uses all four of these? Or is there another person in the Bible where there's all four of these roots, all four of these words in one verse? And of course, there isn't. David's the only person who does this. But what I did was I went through Psalm 119, and what I loved about this was I was like, okay, is Dave, and I mean, we could do this. I could go further. Are there other books that have all four of them in one book? But what was really cool about Psalm 119 is that all four of these show up at some point in Psalm 119. I think one of them shows up 22 times, one shows 2 times. But what was really interesting is I just asked myself, okay, David's about to die. Let's just be contextual here. He's about to die. He knows that Solomon is the promise that's good, that God's going to fulfill his promise through the seed and his seed. And here he's got Solomon. So what does he do? He takes these things, these words that he uses in Psalms 119 and many other places. But what's interesting, he's the only person, and listen, if you can find this differently, I will be really, really excited. I couldn't find another verse that had all four roots in one verse. All four of these words other than David using it. And so what was so cool about it is I thought, okay, what does David want to communicate? So maybe there isn't a difference between the mishpat, and there isn't a difference between that and the statute and the judgment. So what does he tell Solomon? Hey, there's only a few things you got to remember. Remember this. And so he takes each of these words and he pounds them in to Solomon. I mean, if Solomon reads in Psalm 119, if Solomon's reading in different parts of the Psalms, if he goes back and his father is dead, he's going to hear over and over and over again about these charges and these statutes and these commandments. And it's really sad because we can go really further into this, but how long did Solomon keep the charge? I mean, initially he had it, he understood it. And then over time, he didn't continue to do what David told him to do. That's another discussion. But I just thought it was really interesting, Nehemia, that David is the one who pushes this concept in his writings, in those psalms that he's written. And again, I couldn't find any other verse. Now, maybe you, like I said, you could probably tap.
That's the only place, according to my computer program in the Tanakh, that has those four in one verse. But about Psalm 119, for those who don't know, first of all, it's the longest chapter in the Bible. And Psalm 119 is a psalm about the Torah. It's about the commandment of Yehovah in the Torah. And ancient Jews looked at that and they said there are 10 different words for the Torah in this chapter. And we could do a whole teaching just on what those 10 words are. You just put your finger on 4 of them. But it's been argued that every single verse of Psalm 119 refers to the Torah in some way or another. So, for example, verse 1 just says the Torah. Verse 2 says Edotav, his testimonies. Verse 3 says his ways. Verse 4 says his pikudecha, your precepts, or really your commandments.
Can I tell you something funny?
Pretty cool psalm. Yeah.
I'll tell you something funny. When I came to Israel, Nehemia,
I remember
before I met you, this was my big deal. I was trying to get reacquainted with Hebrew, and so what I did is I decided to go through Psalm 119. And what was really interesting, I just have to tell you, is that I was going through those verses, and I think I only found 2, maybe 3 verses where I couldn't find a word to describe something about the Torah. In the entire word. How many verses? Yeah, how many verses are there again?
Oh, a ton.
Like
verses. I don't know.
Anyway, I just, and our friends brought this up also.
176 in the Hebrew.
176. But the interesting thing about it is David is saying, listen, Solomon, I'm going to take these 4 concepts and make sure you understand these 4 concepts in this one thing. This is what you're to do, is you're to keep this charge, to walk in his ways. And how will you do it? By keeping it. Let me please read it in English here for our folks that are looking in the English Bible. To keep his statutes, his commandments, his ordinance, and his testimonies. And then we get to according to what is written in the Torah of Moses. I just think if he didn't get it, he's going to get it there. Make sure you understand what's in the Torah.
Yeah. So can we talk about that phrase, the Torah of Moses?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so that's a pretty cool phrase. So here, assuming we have to point out, the word Torah simply means instruction. And what exactly is the difference between instruction and the commandment? That's not entirely clear, but we see examples of it. For example, in Leviticus, we'll see, this is the Torah, Leviticus 6:2, this is the Torah of the burnt offering. This is the Torah of the flour offering in Leviticus 6:7, Leviticus 6:18, this is the Torah of the sin offering. So it seems to have this sort of ritual connotation, although maybe not. Exodus 12:49 is speaking about it says there will be one Torah for the native born and the sojourner who sojourns among you. Now, what does Torah mean in that verse? Because Torah has two really related but different meanings. One is the narrow sense of a specific commandment or a specific set of commandments, like the commandments concerning the burnt offering. And maybe Exodus 12:49, when it says one Torah for the native born and the sojourner, it's referring to the way that the Passover sacrifice is brought, because that's what it's talking about in Exodus 12. Or maybe it means one Torah in the sense of the collective body of divine instruction. And that collective body of divine instruction, that is called Torat Moshe, the Torah of Moses, or Torat Yehovah, or a few other variations of that. So, for example, Exodus 13:9, it says, "Shall be a sign upon your hand and a memorial between your eyes, in order that the Torah of Yehovah will be in your mouth." So their Torah of Yehovah isn't a specific commandment, like a ritual commandment, like the commandment of the Passover sacrifice or the commandment of the burnt offering. Their Torah Yehovah is the collective body of divine instruction. And there's where, of course, Karaite Jews and rabbinical Jews will have kind of a disagreement. We'll say, well, wait a minute, if there's a second body of divine instruction that was given at Sinai, how come Torah in that collective sense is never referred to in the plural? It's only in the narrow sense, where we'll have the Torah of the burnt offering and the Torah of the Passover. There you'll have a narrow definition, or you'll have a plural. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. But a few verses that refer to the Torah of Moses, it's pretty cool. So, for example, Joshua 8:31, one of my favorite verses, and of course, from my perspective as a Karaite Jew, this proves there was no oral law, but that's a different question. It says, "Ka'asher tziva Moshe eved Yehovah," as Moses, the servant of Yehovah, commanded the children of Israel, as it is written in the book of the Torah of Moses, etc., etc. So here it's talking about, they're building the altar at Mount Ebal. And actually the verse I was looking for that proves the written Torah is a different verse in that area. But whatever. Here in Joshua 8:31, and that was actually a place. Now, did you go with me to Mount Ebal? No, you didn't. I went with Yoel. Have you ever been to the altar at Mount Ebal?
Yes, I went by myself.
Okay, it's a pretty cool place. It's an altar described in Joshua 8:31. I've been there. Keith has been there. Others have been there. And there it mentions, as it is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe. So there we have this idea that even in the time of Joshua, as early as that, there was a book called the Book of the Torah of Moshe.
Amen.
And then it was in Joshua 8:32, it says, "And he wrote there on the stones the copy of the Torah of Moshe, which he wrote before the children of Israel." So next to this altar on Mount Ebal in northern Israel, it was at some time, and maybe it's still there buried, is a copy of the Torah of Moshe. So this was a clearly defined written book. Okay, another verse that has it is 2 Kings 14:6. It also says, as is written in the book of the Torah of Moshe. 2 Kings 23:25. Also, it says, also mentions the Torah of Moshe. Malachi 3:22. It says, "Remember the Torah of Moshe, my servant." Daniel 9:11. It refers to that which is written in the Torah of Moshe, the servant of God. And there's a bunch of other verses. I'm not going to bring them all. Now let's bring a different variation, which is Torat Elohim, the Torah of God, which is Joshua 24:26. And this is really interesting. It says, "And Joshua wrote these things in the book of the Torah of God."
Yes.
So Joshua wrote in the Torah. And so what's the distinction there? There's this scroll, like literally a physical scroll, called the Torah of Moshe, the book of the Torah of Moshe, and the part that Joshua wrote is the Torah of God. Meaning it includes the Torah of Moshe, and it has this extra thing that we call the book of Joshua, which, some people, there's the term the Pentateuch, or the 5 books. So some people call it a hexateuch, or the 6 books, including the book of Joshua, based on Joshua 24:26. So Isaiah 1:10 mentions the Torah of our God. Hosea 4:6, and also Psalm 37:31. So 4 times in Tanakh we have this idea of not just the Torah of Moshe, but the Torah of God. And of course, Torat Yehovah, the Torah of Yehovah, we already saw that in Exodus 13:9, and it's a few other places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you one thing, Nehemia, when I do think about that, this Torah, this instruction, and David does such an amazing job. He's charging Solomon. He's saying, "This is what you need to do." And then whenever I get in Hebrew, this idea in English, it says it so that here's the reason why, that Yehovah may carry out His promise. And of course, we could spend the entire time just talking about what that promise is. But He tells him this promise which He spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons are careful of their way to walk before me in truth with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Speaking about this promise that we all wait for, that ultimate promise, the messianic promise of the one who comes through the loins of David. But I did think it was interesting in Psalms 132:12. Maybe you can take a look at this, Psalms 132:12, that he's telling him, here's the promise. And then in Psalms 132:12 it says, if your sons will keep my covenant and my testimony, which I will teach them, their sons shall also sit upon your throne forever. So I'm just thinking again of David as he's laying there and he's got this promise. And I don't know. I mean, does he turn over in his grave, as they say, when he sees Solomon all of a sudden leave the commandments of God, and he sees the sons of his sons of his sons of his sons leave those commandments, and knowing that here's going to be the choice. If you keep them, here's what's going to happen. If you don't, here's what's going to happen. And I know as a father, and I've seen you, Nehemia, where on Shabbat. I know we talk about this. But this really touched me. It's something that's a tradition. But just the idea of a father touching his son and putting a blessing on that son, or on a daughter, or on a child. And there's the ups and downs of that. There's the times that you see your children walk it out and you're excited, and then there's times where you see that they don't, and what happens as a result. So I'm just looking at this, and like David is really clear in telling him, listen, there's been a promise. Here's what you have to do.
Right, but it's conditional, though. I mean, and that's something that is emphasized in both obviously this verse and the verse you read in Psalms, and a bunch of other verses as well. And I wish we had time to talk about Jeremiah 33, where it talks about a descendant always being from the line of David. But of course, that's in the context of this conditional. And I think, is that one of the prophet portions? I don't remember. I hope it is, because I really like that passage. But it's definitely a conditional promise, and
Yeah. So here's the deal, and I know we do have I get a little bit nervous, folks, as we're doing these recordings. That each one I have some people say their fingers crossed. I just pray about it, because that we can get through the recording without any hitches. I mean, I've got these people drilling outside, and
we don't hear that, or I don't hear it anyway.
I'm so glad. But can we do something? Can we just move on a little bit, because I think there's a switch here that's really interesting. You're going to love this. The switch is he's telling him now, listen, keep the commands and keep the. Now I'm about to die. Now real quick, there's some business we got to take care of. He's like the Godfather. We got some.
Wait! You got to explain to the people who haven't seen the movie, how is he like the Godfather?
No. I'm saying so. David's about ready to. And he's being really spiritual.
You're not saying how he's like the Godfather. So in the Godfather movies, in the second one, I think, is just flashback to when he's a young man. I think it's played by Robert De Niro, and he puts his finger up to his temple and he says, I remember. He doesn't forget. So you're calling David like the Godfather? I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
Listen, what I'm trying to say
is David's like Robert De Niro, and he's going to settle the score.
So he's going to settle this. I think it's really interesting, Nehemia. And again, you be the timekeeper on us here. It says here you've been going a little bit, but here's the thing that's really interesting, and I want to challenge people to do this. If we don't want to give it away to them, okay? Can I just challenge them on this first part? Because the second part, we're not going to get out of here without you talking about it. Oh. In 2:5, where he says, also what Joab basically did when he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel. Yeah. And he tells them who the two commanders are. Now, what I want to challenge people to do is this. I want them to take the phrase of the two commanders and to read the stories about what happened. It is a phenomenal Nehemia, I get really, me, sometimes I have to get up and walk away when I'm reading the Bible, and I walk out the door and
he literally does that.
And I get excited. But here's what excited me about this, is that if I just read this verse, It's a casual little thing. Hey, don't forget what Abner did. And you want to move on.
What he did
but
to
what
Abner.
I did,
Here's
what I did
concerning Abner. Yeah.
No, so what I did was, as I went through every time that I saw the word Abner, and I went through every time that I saw the word of the commanders, and you know what? It paints a really, really, really deep picture about why this is such an issue for David. I mean, literally, I'm just saying, you could take a kind of casual approach and just say, David's, had this one little thing happen. These are like really major things that took place, and like I said, we could do a show. We could literally do a show on why David is telling Solomon to address the issue of Joab. And
so here's the more important question. Go ahead. Sorry, go finish what you're saying.
No, I just want to challenge people to actually do this. This is a part of a Bible study where you take the word Joab and you find out how many times.
So we're asking people to join us in this week's episode because we don't have enough time. So if you cannot say you've listened to this episode until you've gone and done this part of the study on your own.
Exactly.
And specifically, you need to be looking at 2 Samuel chapter 17, and that's the issue of Amasa. You'll read that whole chapter, 2 Samuel 17. That's the story of Absalom, and you'll find out what happened to Amasa there. And then it's going to be in 1 Samuel chapter... let's see. I don't know. I'm looking for it. Just go on what we were saying.
While you're looking for those verses, people, you can also be looking for these verses about what happens with Joab, but especially as far as how it affected David and how it affected how people saw David, and it goes even further, Nehemia, because he doesn't talk about the other things that Joab did in this verse that actually probably affected him also. Like, for example, as it pertains to his son Absalom. You get a sense when you're reading it, the weight of what David is saying to Solomon regarding this man. Now, what I wanted to do, and I kind of wanted to give you the softball on this, if it's okay. Yeah. Maybe you found the other verse you want to say what those are.
I'm looking for
that means no.
Go ahead.
So then, while he's it's okay. It's okay because there's 3 sections here, and if I want to get to the one that I want to really have you to talk about, if that's okay. Can I keep reading?
Yeah.
So then it says here, as it pertains to him, he says he shed blood of war and peace, and he put the blood of war in his belt. So act according to your wisdom, and then it says this phrase, and do not let his gray hair go down to Sheol in peace. Yeah. Sheol. Okay. Yeah. So what's that talking about, Nehemia? Yeah. What is Sheol?
Sheol is the realm of the dead, and if you go and read Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 1 through 10, it describes what happens with Sheol. Everyone goes to Sheol, the good and the bad, and you're in a state of sleep there. There's no thought and knowledge and action in Sheol where everyone is going.
Okay,
so
awesome.
That's why we read in, for example, Daniel and other places, Isaiah 26, about the resurrection being described as being woken up. Because there's, the way it's in the Tanakh view, you're in a state of soul sleep in Sheol until you're awoken at the resurrection. So the 2 sections to read are 2 Samuel chapter 3 about Abner, and 2 Samuel chapter 17 about Amasa.
Awesome. And then if you have some energy and some time, look at some other passages there with him and their interactions, and you might be even understand why this is such a big deal.
Well, to get the context, especially about Abner, you need to go back and look at the interaction he had with Joab's brother Asael, who he murdered or killed, I should say.
Yes.
So it's a whole complex web. But here's the question I have. So he's telling Solomon to deal with Joab. How come he didn't deal with Joab himself?
Yeah, that's such a great question.
What's the answer?
I don't know.
I think he wasn't strong enough.
You don't think he had...
Meaning Joab was his general, and he was dependent on Joab. And maybe he was psychologically dependent on Joab. And he didn't feel like he could do it. Now, the other situations we hear about, he gave his word he wouldn't deal with them, and so he's leaving them for Solomon. In the following verse. But Joab, he didn't give Joab his word. I think he was afraid of Joab. I think it pretty much says that he was psychologically dependent on Joab and didn't think he could do it with, didn't think his kingdom would stand without this general. And once his son took over, okay, then it could be dealt with.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, the next person that we talk about, again, people can go and they can see this. It's really a touching story for David as he goes and finds people that will actually support and help him in the process of really a difficult time in his life. And then it's interesting because at the end of his life he says, now remember, make sure that you treat this person, and not only this person, but also I think it says here even his sons. Am I right here? Yeah, but show kindness even to his sons. Barzillai, the Gileadite.
Right, because he was an old man even when David had the interaction with him.
Yeah, he was old.
Back in 2 Samuel 17. And so the point is, by this time, he's got one foot in the grave, and so really the blessing is going to be to his sons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now here's the big challenge for you. Now this is where I got to. Yeah. I want you to go to 1 Kings 2:8. You did an amazing. Remember the teaching we talked about? You called it one of the best teachings you've ever done.
It was absolutely the shimmy teaching.
About the shimmy teaching, and it really is really interesting because we went to the issue of his name and listen to me and all that. So David takes this really beautiful approach to let shimmy let shimmy be shimmy, and then he gets to his deathbed. And he brings this guy's.
I don't forget.
He brings this guy's name up, and so when you read that, how do you?
Yeah.
What's your thought when you hear David?
I think his point with Shimei is keep an eye on this guy. He's dangerous. Keep an eye on him. I gave my word not to kill him, so I'm not going to touch him. You keep your eye on him, and so he doesn't tell him to kill him. He says you'll know what to do. All right, and he says, and you'll bring down his old age with blood to Sheol. And look, so what happens, and obviously this isn't in the portion, so we can't talk too much about it, but what ends up happening is he says, he says to Shimei, look, you can live the rest of your life here without a problem, just don't make trouble. Just don't leave Jerusalem, I want to be able to keep my eye on you. And Shimei accepts this, and then he breaks the terms, and he gets executed because he violated the order of a king. So Shimei had a chance to live out his days in peace, but Shimei was Shimei. Shimei was Shimei's worst enemy.
Yeah,
and you can't change that, You
can't change that. So it's interesting, Nehemia. I'm going to transition because we didn't get a chance to talk. But imagine now, David is at the end of his life, and this has actually had me think a lot about Nehemia. Some situations that I've actually been dealing with over the last month or so. I had 2 people who actually died. One of them was a man who was a mentor of sorts. His name was Dr. Miles Monroe, and he all he talked about was purpose and living your purpose. He says one of the worst things, one of the saddest things is to go by a graveyard. And you look in a graveyard and you see how many things are in that grave where people never did it because they had too many excuses and issues and they never really lived it out. And then the other one was a young man that I worked with named Orlando Thomas, who died of Lou Gehrig's disease. Both of these men died on the same day. One in a tragic plane accident. Yeah, one in a tragic plane accident. The other one died at age 42 with Lou Gehrig's disease, and he wore the number 42, and it was on his birthday.
Wow.
And so as I was just dealing with these things, I thought about David, and I thought about my own life, and I thought about ministry, and I thought about putting it all on the line, doing everything that I can do while I have breath. And then so that when that day comes, if I have a chance to look into my son's eyes and charge them as David did, that I can also say, I've done what God has called me to do. And so that kind of leads to a little bit. I don't want to cut things too short, but we're going a little bit long. I want to give a chance to talk a little bit about what we are doing. I mean, we're in different parts of the world right now, but we're still ministering, and and we're doing things. They're interesting. I want to hand it over. Is there can you update us on what's
so this is the ministry minute. So you go first. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So for me right now, it's the beginning of this calendar year, and we really had a push at the end of this last year to give people as many as opportunities as possible. I have to raise a white flag. I did something really, really radical, and as of right now, those that are listening can actually experience it. You used to make fun of us, Nehemia, at BFA. You'd say, "What's this premium content library? What's this premium content library?"
I still make fun of you. Go on.
No, don't. You don't make fun of me. No, but let me just say something. We decided to do something. We've had to realize one of the best ways for people to experience something is to give it away. And so what we're doing now is we're doing a 7-day free trial for people to actually go in and see what's in the premium content library. And if they like it, great. They're able to support us through being a part of it. But if not, they cancel, there's no harm, no foul, no risk to them. But one of the reasons that we're doing this is we just put up the Hanukkah special that we talk a lot about Hanukkah, but one of the things that's interesting about Hanukkah is what the real Hanukkah is historically versus kind of what we see in American society, which I have to just give you a little quick thing, is that I read a site where they actually said that they called Hanukkah the Jewish Christmas, and I was offended, Nehemia. What do you mean the Jewish Christmas?
It's 100% true.
No, don't say that. No.
No, so Hanukkah, the way it's observed today in America, has little resemblance to the way it was observed, even in the time of even when I was growing up, but definitely in the way when my grandmother was growing up. At the most you might get Hanukkah gelt, which was, a few dollars to go buy yourself a present. This idea of 8 days of gifts, and come on, that's a Christmas wannabe.
All I got to say is we did an amazing 30-minute episodes available right now. You can watch it. No harm, no foul. Like I said, no risk, great reward. But with BFA, what we're doing is we're inspiring people around the world to build a biblical foundation for their faith. And how we're doing that is every opportunity, Prophet Pearls, Scripture Bites, the Hanukkah Project, Time Will Tell, Now is the Time. All of these things now available. I think there's over 100 available on our site, bfainternational.com. You can go and you can see them. And literally, it's our way of saying, look, we really do need your help. But hey, first, why don't you take a look and see if it's something that's in line with what you're trying to do in building your faith. And if so, consider becoming a part of the Premium Content Library. That's my Ministry Minute right now. That's one of the things that we're doing. And as we go throughout these next weeks, Nehemia, I want to fill in the blanks as far as what I'm doing in this part of the world with the doors that are opening to bring God's time, Torah, and His name. So, thanks. Yeah.
Hallelujah. Well, I want to just, you've got your ministry, Biblical Foundations Academy International. My ministry is Makor Hebrew Foundation. That's M-A-K-O-R, Makor. That's the Hebrew word for source. It refers to Yehovah being the source of the living water. And I just want to give a shout out to my support team, those who have supported my ministry. Those are the trumpeters who are standing with me on the wall, I call them. And for everybody who's listening right now, I want you to put down your cup of coffee. And more importantly, this week, I'm going to ask you to put down your checkbook and put down your credit card, at least as pertains to my ministry. Instead, I'm going to ask you to do something really radical. I'm not going to ask you for money. I'm going to ask you to join me in prayer, because I really, really need people to support my ministry with prayer. So please turn your hearts to our Father in heaven, to Yehovah, the creator of the universe, and pray for my ministry, for me to be able to get the message out. I'm really struggling with that in many ways. And obviously money is really important for doing that, but even more important is prayer. So please, this week I'm just going to ask you to pray for me and pray for my ministry. My website, nehemiaswall.com, is one of the main avenues where I get out information. Please just pray for everything I'm doing. I do want to ask people to go to iTunes, and if you're interested in getting this podcast on a weekly basis, we actually have this really cool thing where we can hack into your phone, and we sneak into your phone, and it automatically will download this episode. And I'm joking, we don't actually hack into your phone. But if you go to iTunes and you subscribe to this podcast using an iPhone, or if you're on a normal phone like mine, an Android, you can use various podcast programs. I use Pocket Casts. There's another one called, Podcast Republic, and various other ones like that. Some of them are free. And you subscribe to the Nehemia's Wall podcast, and every week you'll get the Prophet Pearls, you'll get the Torah Pearls, and you'll get other audio teachings that I'm doing. One of the ways you could really help us is go to iTunes and give us a rating or review on Nehemia's Wall podcast. And what that does is it actually gets the podcast in front of other people. So someone will go into iTunes looking for, hey, I want a podcast, something to do with Torah, and they'll put that in. And if we have more ratings and reviews, more people get to see it. It's actually really cool. I'm very excited about this. I actually went in the other day to iTunes, and my podcast, which includes Prophet Pearls and Torah Pearls and other things, it's called the Nehemia's Wall podcast. So it has, as of, and obviously it's pre-recorded, so it might be more now, but it has a very good number. I think it was 26 ratings and reviews. And as a result, when you go into the Judaism section on iTunes, it's listed as the number one actually, now it's 27. Yesterday it was 26. It's listed as the number one program under the in the Judaism section as something like hot, new and noteworthy. That's what it's called. There's a section called New and Noteworthy, and the number one podcast of New and Noteworthy is Nehemia's Wall podcast. So I really appreciate everybody who's been out there doing the ratings and reviews and joining me in prayer. And please turn your heart to your Father in heaven and pray for my ministry. Makor Hebrew Foundation, nehemiaswall.com. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Well, it's as I mentioned before, Nehemia, we try our best to stay within about an hour. We're a little over. The two verses that were left actually have to do with what happened to David. We know because the beginning of the story tells us that he's about to die. And it says, and he slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David. The days that David reigned over Israel were 40. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. And Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom, and I love this, was firmly established. I don't know. When we have our next one, I won't do it. What are you talking about? I have a 30-minute teaching just on that word firmly. It was firmly established, and I'm going to share it. There's nothing going to stop me from sharing that. I actually do, but I'm not going to share it. So just look in the Hebrew for those who want, and I wish this had been the word of the week. The word there, where they translate it firmly, it's the last word of the verse, the last word of the section, it's the word me'od. And it says, Vatikon malchuto, and his kingdom was established, me'od. And oh man, we could have so much fun teaching about that. Me'od, for those who don't know, didn't you have a teaching? Is that on the Open Door series? Yeah,
somewhere you had a teaching about the word me'od and the Shema. Where is that?
Yeah. It's in one of those many, that's why I'm telling you, people,
there's so many hours of teaching, I don't even know where everything is. But I'm pretty sure it's in the Open Door series, in one of the episodes where Keith is talking, and he speaks about how it says, and it has the Shema, it says, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, Hear, O Israel, Yehovah is our God, Yehovah is one, Ve'ahavta et Yehovah Elohecha, and you shall love Yehovah your God, B'chol avavcha, with all your heart, U'b'chol nafshecha, and with all your soul, U'b'chol me'odecha, and with all your me'od. And here his kingdom was established. Me'od. Hallelujah. That is a powerful thing. Oh, man, we could have a lot of fun teaching on that.
Well, I will say this, Nehemia. I don't know, every week's going to be a challenge. I know we're going to have our issues with time. You're going to get confused about what time it is and all those sorts of things. We've got technology.
I'm on Yehovah's time, not the time of the Chinese Communist Republic.
Yeah, the doors are flinging open on so many different levels. We want people to pray for us. In the meantime, do this. Everyone keep reading, keep studying, and we're going to keep on working as the opportunity comes. So is there anything else you'd want to say?
I just want to end with a prayer. May I do that?
Amen. Do that. Yes.
Yehovah Avinu Shabashamayim, Yehovah our Father in heaven. Yehovah, I look forward to the day where the descendant of David, who sits on the throne, the one who will come and he will keep your mishmeret, he will keep your treasure, and he will teach us to keep your treasure.
Amen.
And he will sit on your throne, on the throne of David, of your people, of the kingdom, and his kingdom will be established firmly. His kingdom will be established me'od. May it be soon, Yehovah. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson. For more information, please visit nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com.